Hello, this is the Harboring Light. I'm Mary. I give a conservative take about the world around me. Feedback is immensely important. Feel free to reach out, and I greatly appreciate those who do. And also, since the holiday seasons are coming up, the seasons, with Thanksgiving, Christmas, and so forth, feel free to reach out and, perhaps give me holidays, talk about holiday stories, meal ideas that's been passed down through families or friends and so forth. And I will read those on the show. So, some of the audio platforms that I'm on Spreaker, Spotify, Pandora, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music. These are just to name a few. So it's Friday, so I am focusing in on all of you. This time I'm going to center around the Filipino language. Here we go. Okay, so before I jump in, I want to give some thoughts. So, the Philippine language is a really good example of how blending different cultures, that works, or how that really implements the development of a culture and of language. So, what am I saying about this? I remember, when I was growing up, I had Filipino friends and so forth, and she was like her family was the first generation, to come to from the Philippines to come to America, and then it's just the cultural values that she would talk about versus everything with her. It's quite interesting because the difference between being born in America and the difference between coming to America from another country, and then adapting and adjusting your own values. And so there's that, and then on the other side of also when my mom was working and everything, but she's retired now. She told me that there was, she would talk about customers and so forth. That she, on a day-to-day basis, because she used to work as a teller at a bank, and particularly there was a Filipino customer, a lady, and everything. And she would talk about how the different cultural values about the aspects of when we talk about that when it comes to food specifically, was a good way to get a good introduction, a quick introduction into the language and culture, because the food that Filipino food, a lot of it was influenced, and a lot of the language is influenced from Spanish culture. And so also I understood that too, because as I was getting older, other people would say, yeah, that's true, who are Filipino, they would say about the influence of speaking Spanish in school and everything, because I also, to add on to this, there were two teachers I remember when I was, like sophomore and then a junior in high school. And Mr. Kubaku, and then the other a math teacher, both of those guys. And they were very different in, I would say, in the aspects of structuring their lesson plans towards students. So Mr. Kubaku, he was a chemistry teacher, and so he had the pragmatic mentality, that, and I can, when you're a kid, you're like, what? But when you become an adult, you see things differently, if you choose to. So, hold on just a minute. And so, his idea and his point of view about learning is that you should be actively engaged. And if you're not actively engaged, then really what are we doing? And, and then he also had the perspective that if I show and teach you, if you're not listening to me, don't ask the same thing over again. And, when you think about that, that is a good way to ground a young person into thinking critically. Because on the surface level, he had the attitude, the persona. The best way I can describe this is, Khan is Laotian, from King of the Hill. The personalities, they were quite similar in the aspects of the rapport with people and, demeanor. And versus, I wish I remembered his name. He was such a sweet guy. But it's one of those things where I don't know what is it about that. They were both very impressionable on my aspects about education and learning. But I don't know. It's just maybe the name is more pronounced to where, Mr. Kubaku, where, it's something that stays with you. But I don't really think it's the aspects of, negativity, is the reason why I remember his name. Because, even though I didn't agree with him and, I just thought he was the worst person on the planet Earth, at the time, I started to understand. And then I understood more as I graduated and so forth. But it's just one of those things, But the other teacher that I'm talking about now, not Mr. Kubaku, the way that his rapport with students was a lot different. So he was very, more in the aspects of more engaged and more understanding, more diplomatic. And he shared a story with me, and this really resonated with me, as I went on. He said, when I first started and to be a teacher, it was really funny because, the class was rowdy and everything. And people, the students thought that I was a student, so they didn't realize, that I was there, and I was the instructor. And so when I made it myself clear that I am the instructor, and that stuff slowly started to change, and they, and then the students started to take his classroom seriously, more seriously. And he also shared this with me, which is really fundamental about the aspects of teachers. When I can't stress enough the impact of how really good teachers really form and shape young minds into becoming well-grounded individuals. And I was very fortunate enough to have that in my life because at home, my home life wasn't really good. And I can't thank them enough, the teachers that were there. I'm sorry, y'all. To uplift me and say that through education, you are enough. And that just means the world. And he really, I internalized that too, the aspects of other teachers. They helped me and, were really supportive and just wonderful teachers. He said that when he was growing up, he's Filipino too. He said that he was just the worst child. He was just really he just acted out. It was just bad. And so his mom and his family, said, well, maybe to give him, so they give him, what do you call that? Like, tough love. They sent him to, go when he was of age to do so, to go and get trained and learn different things. And then he eventually understood that teaching was really valuable to give him more discipline and more structure in his life. And so he used those elements in his teaching methods. And so how does this relate to everything in the aspects of what I'm going to talk about today when we think about, and then when in the versus the aspects of Filipino in the language? It is the Philippine language. I mean, there's other languages that, is so many different cultural influences on it, right? But languages specifically like Filipino and so forth, these types of languages, they're really implemented in the aspects of how getting different influences from different cultures and learning to adapt and then merge things of your own, of your own value and making the language for yourself, just working with it. It really is a monumental point of how that is truly progressive in the aspects of flourishing a culture. All right, so with this said, I am going to get into the facts about the Philippine language. Here we go. Okay, so sources will, of course, be provided. So I'm going to start out with the AI generated response and then add on to this. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. It's something for my children. I just appreciate the notes, but from school, I was just reading that right quick. Okay, so the origin of the Philippine language traces back to the Austroasian language family, one of the largest language families in the world, with roots in the migration and the Proto-Austrian speakers from Taiwan approximately 4,000 years ago. So these early settlers reached the Philippine archipelago around 2200 BC, bringing with them the Proto-Philippine language from which Old Tagalog evolved. Old Tagalog, also known as the Old Filipino, was the primary language of the pre-colonial settlement as the Tondo Nemani in the Millennium and was written using the Babylonian script. The term Telog itself is derived from Telalago, meaning river dweller, reflecting the language geograph roots along rivers like the Pasig. While Filipino is primarily based on Tagalog, it is not it is not identical to it. Rather, it is a standardized form that incorporates a vocabulary and structural elements from other Philippine languages, as well as influences from Spain, English, Malay, and Chinese due to the centers of trade, colonization, and cultural exchange. Spanish colonization from 1565 to 1898 introduced a significant number of loan words and influenced grammar, while American rule led to the widespread adoption of English, which countries continue to influence modern Filipino, especially the urban areas throughout the use of the Taglish, a blend of Tagalog and English. The language was officially designated as Filipino in 1987, following its selection as the basis for the international language in 1937 and its remaining for Filipino in 1958. Today, Filipino serves as an international language and one of the two official languages of the Philippines, functioning as a unified lingua franca across the country's diverse ethno-linguistic groups. All right, so I'm going to add on to this, because as I said, language, AI-generated responses is not all what it seems. You take it with a grain of salt. All right, so here is Polylingua, and it is, I'm going to start out by saying these things about it. Okay. It says the Tagalog is a part of the Australian family, which is one of the world's largest language families, both in terms of geographic spread and number of speakers. The Australian language are believed to have originated from Taiwan, with migrations occurring over 4,000 years ago. The speakers of Proto-Australians language was southward, reaching the Philippines approximately 4,000 years ago. Tagalog, like other Philippine language, developed from this Proto-Austronesian base, pre-colonial period. So before the Spanish colonization of the Philippines in the late 16th century, as I was mentioning, talking about the Spanish influence here, Tagalog was primarily spoken by the people in the central and southern parts of Luzon, the largest island in the Philippines. It was one of several languages in the region and was used in a rich oral tradition of poetry, song, and epic storytelling. And so, that's another thing that's really important in the aspects of spreading cultural understanding, in a way that people can cohesively understand. Things are different when you get in the aspects of language and all of that. But, language is in itself, a really massive supplement to everything that goes with this certain culture that it is addressing. But to add on to it, when you get into the aspects about how, tales and aspects of religion and then the aspects of folklore, it really gives a broader sense of understanding about the cultural values, of something. All right, so one of the most significant linguistic effects of Spanish colonization was the influx of Spanish words and phrases into Tagalog. As the language of power, Spanish influenced Tagalog vocabulary, leading to the adoption of numerous loan words. Words related to religion, government, trade, and everyday items found their way into Tagalog, enriching the language. Beyond more vocabulary, Spanish also influenced Tagalog syntax and grammar. Sentence structure and word order changed due to Spanish influence, resulting into linguistic fusion that reflects the cultural exchange between two languages, the 19th and 20th century. In the late 19th century, as the Filipino national identity began to develop, Tagalog was central in the aspects of the nationalist ideas. So the Revolutionary Society used Tagalog in its literature and communication. So by the 20th century, particularly during the American colonial period, Tagalog's prominence continued to grow. Despite the imposition of English as the medium of instruction in schools, Tagalog maintained its influence through its use in literature, media, and daily communication among Filipinos. So the establishment of the Institute of National Language in 1937, which later declared Tagalog as the basis for the national language, originally called this Filipino. And it was a significant milestone. So after the independence of the Philippines in 1946, efforts to promote and standardize Tagalog intensified, and the language became a symbol of national identity and pride, reflecting its incorporating into the educational system and governmental functions. So in the 1987 Philippine Constitution further solidified Tagalog's status by recognizing Filipino, based on Tagalog as an international language, ensuring its continued growth and development in the modern era. And so revolutions also are very impactful in the aspects of society and culture too. I find it quite interesting in the aspects of revolution, war, and how that shapes countries. You know, some people have the approach that war is not necessary, and some people have a different point of view. But I think in the grand scheme of things, it's one of those, to look at war in this sense here. Sometimes, think about it like this here. And then that in the aspects in itself is what helps change things for the best or for the worst. I'm sure y'all all can relate to this when you were children and, even now. Sometimes there's people out there that no matter what you say, no matter what you do, you can be just diplomatic as possible, nice as possible, understanding as possible. They're still going to do what they want to do, and destruction and mayhem, for whatever reason, is the choice. And so that's why it's very commendable for people to stand up and go against these things. And that's why in itself war happens. But that's not always the case.
Hello, Moto.
That's not always the case. There's more, nuance to these things here. But it's just very pronounced and interesting how war can change the aspects of language. Hold on, my child is looking for me. My youngest daughter. I'll send a message to my husband. Tell him where I am. Okay. All right. Then she should be in here shortly. And if you hear little bop, 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 talking in the background, that's my baby girl. All right, so it says contemporary times. Today, Tagalog, officially known as Filipino, is a significant symbol of national identity in the Philippines. It is widely used in the government, education, media, and business. And our government, Filipino, is utilized in official documents and public communications. Educational institutes teach Filipino as a part of their curricula and media. Filipino is prominent in television, radio, print, and digital platforms. The language continues to evolve, incorporating elements from other Philippine languages and international languages such as English. This historically, the journey highlights how Tagalog has been influenced by various cultural exchanges and political changes over the centuries, showcasing its ongoing adaptation and growth. The evolution of Tagalog from its original origins in the Austronesian language family is the role as an international language of the Philippines, which showcased the adaptivity and country and continuity of the Philippine cultural identity. I'm sorry, guys. Be careful with them, okay? All right, so continue this out here. Tagalog has played a crucial role in the socio-political landscape of the Philippines. All right. Embodying the cultural framework, symbolizing both unity. I'm sorry, guys. No, I'm sorry, baby. Sorry, guys. Symbolizing both unity and resilience. All right, God, man. Ooh, my throat's kind of dry, so sorry about that. All right, so this reaches the end of the Harboring Light. Tune in, turn up, and take care. Bye-bye. Bye-bye for now.